A 5-year-old child, barefoot and in a tattered little dress, extended her tiny, frail hand to a couple exiting a luxurious restaurant. All she wanted was a piece of bread. What she received was a slap across the face and a lesson in cruelty. But across the street, a millionaire witnessed everything, and his life would be forever changed when he discovered who that little girl really was. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The air conditioning in the 47th floor office hummed against the reinforced glass windows, creating a silent barrier between the millionaire and the world below. He watched the city through those tinted panes, his fingers drumming impatiently on the mahogany desk as he analyzed financial reports that would decide the fate of hundreds of employees. The man was known for his cold, calculating demeanor. At 42, he had built an empire based on quick decisions and controlled emotions. There was no room for sentimentality in his millionaire routine, only numbers, profits, and strategies that secured his position at the top of the corporate food chain. That Tuesday morning, like every other, he reviewed the company's budget cuts. 300 employees would be laid off by the end of the month. To him, they were just statistics on a spreadsheet, operating costs that needed to be eliminated. His secretary had attempted to mention that many of those names represented entire families dependent on those salaries, but he cut her off with a curt wave of his hand. "Business is business," he muttered to himself, signing the documents with the same ease as choosing wine for dinner. Across town, in a reality that seemed to exist on another planet, a 5-year-old girl woke up under the awning of an abandoned storefront. Her large, dark eyes blinked slowly, adjusting to the light filtering through the grimy windows that served as her makeshift roof. The little blue dress, which must have once been pretty, now hung on her skinny frame like a ghost of lost childhood. She stretched carefully, checking if her teddy bear was still safely in her arms. It was all she possessed in the world. A faded toy with only one eye, but one that held all her dreams and fragmented memories of a time she could barely remember. Hunger gnawed at her empty stomach for 2 days. It wasn't a new sensation, but today it felt more persistent, more urgent. She knew she would need to go out in search of food, but her bare feet were already sore from previous walks through the rough streets of the city. She got up slowly, putting the teddy bear inside a torn plastic bag she used as a makeshift backpack. Her small, silent steps led her to the busy sidewalk, where hurried executives and well-dressed housewives passed by as if she were invisible. She had learned that people were too busy to notice a dirty child asking for help. Some ignored her completely, others averted their gaze in discomfort, and a few, very few, stopped to offer a coin or a piece of food. That day, she decided to try her luck near the expensive restaurants. She had noticed that people who came out of these places sometimes carried packages with leftover food, and maybe, just maybe, someone would have enough pity to share a little bit. Meanwhile, atop the corporate tower, the millionaire finished signing the last documents. His schedule was packed: a meeting with Japanese investors, a satellite conference with the European branch, and a business dinner at one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. He stood up, adjusting the Italian suit that cost more than many people earned in a year. His reflection in the window glass showed an impeccably dressed man, but with empty eyes, as if all the wealth in the world wasn't enough to fill an invisible hole in his soul. He couldn't remember the last time he had genuinely smiled. He couldn't remember the last time he had felt anything beyond the cold satisfaction of a successful deal. His life was a sequence of appointments, contracts, and achievements that became increasingly meaningless. He took the private elevator to the underground garage, where his driver was already waiting next to the armored car. It was time to leave for another day of meetings that would decide fates without him needing to look into the eyes of the people affected by his decisions. Across town, the girl walked slowly along the sidewalk, carrying her teddy bear and a hope as fragile as glass. She didn't know that in a few hours, her life and the life of the man at the top of the tower would intertwine in a way that would forever change their destinies. The sun began to heat the asphalt, and she felt the hunger tighten her small stomach even more. She needed to find food soon, before her strength completely abandoned her. Le Jardin was one of those places where each dish cost more than many families spend on food during an entire month. Its glass walls offered a panoramic view of the city, creating the illusion that diners floated above the common reality, in their own world of refined flavors and whispered conversations about million-dollar deals. The girl had strategically positioned herself on the sidewalk in front of the restaurant, watching with attentive eyes the people who came and went. She had learned to read the signs, who was too rushed to stop, who averted their gaze in discomfort, and who, occasionally, showed a flash of humanity amid the urban rush. Her stomach rumbled softly, a sound she tried to muffle by hugging her teddy bear tighter. 2 days without food had left her weakened, but her determination remained unshaken. She had survived worse situations, and she knew she just needed an opportunity, a moment of kindness from some compassionate stranger. When she saw the couple leaving the restaurant, carrying an elegant paper bag with leftover food, her eyes lit up with a shy hope. The woman wore a dress that probably cost more than the girl could imagine, and the man sported a watch that glittered in the sunlight like a small fortune on his wrist. The girl approached with hesitant steps, mentally rehearsing the words she had learned to say in the sweetest voice possible. She knew that the way she asked for help made a difference. She couldn't appear too aggressive or desperate, otherwise people would turn away in fear. "Excuse me, could you spare a piece of bread?" she asked in a soft voice, extending her small hand towards the bag the woman was carrying, her large, dark eyes fixed on the package with a hope that seemed almost tangible in the warm afternoon air. The reaction was instant and brutal. The woman recoiled, as if the girl were carrying some contagious disease, her face contorting into an expression of disgust and irritation. "Get away from me, you filthy thing!" she shouted, pushing the child with a violence disproportionate to the situation. The man beside her didn't even look up from his cell phone, as if the scene before him was just another urban nuisance that didn't deserve his attention. His indifference was almost as cruel as his companion's aggression. But what followed crossed all boundaries of human cruelty. The woman's hand, which had pushed the girl, turned into a clenched fist and then an open palm. The slap echoed across the sidewalk like a sharp crack, a sound that seemed to tear the fabric of humanity. The girl fell to her knees on the rough ground, one hand instinctively protecting the cheek that burned with pain, while the other still firmly held her teddy bear. The physical impact was strong, but it was nothing compared to what followed. Across the street, on the 47th floor of the most imposing office building in the area, the millionaire had just left a particularly tense meeting. European investors had questioned some of his methods, suggesting that perhaps it was time to consider more socially responsible policies in his companies. He had dismissed these suggestions with his usual cold smile, explaining that sentimentality didn't pay dividends. Now, as he waited for the elevator, his attention was drawn to the movement on the street below. Through the reinforced window, he saw the scene unfold like a film in slow motion. He saw the girl approach the couple. He saw the push. He saw the slap that knocked her to the ground. But what paralyzed him completely, what made his heart stop for a moment, was what happened next. The girl didn't cry. She got up slowly, with a dignity that contrasted sharply with her fragile appearance. She wiped the blood that trickled from the corner of her mouth with the back of her hand, adjusted her tattered dress, and looked directly into the eyes of the woman who had assaulted her. "It's okay," she said in a voice that carried a wisdom impossible for her 5 years of age. "I'm used to it not hurting on the outside anymore. The worst is when it hurts inside, from so much emptiness. The words crossed the reinforced glass, crossed the 47 floors of distance, crossed all the barriers that the millionaire had built around his heart over the years. They hit him like a direct bullet, shattering something fundamental in his carefully shielded soul. He pressed the palm of his hand against the glass, feeling for the first time in years something he couldn't name. It wasn't pity. It was something much deeper, much more disturbing. It was as if that tiny child had just shown him a mirror of his own empty soul. "Stop the car," he muttered to the driver over the intercom, his voice hoarse and unrecognizable. "Sir," came the confused reply from downstairs. "Stop the car!" he shouted, pressing the elevator button with an urgency he hadn't felt in decades. Down below on the sidewalk, the girl had already moved away from the couple, walking slowly with her teddy bear pressed against her chest. The woman and the man continued on their way as if nothing had happened, losing themselves in the crowd of indifferent pedestrians. But for the millionaire, who descended the 47 floors with his heart pounding erratically, everything had changed. Those words, "The worst is when it hurts inside," from so much emptiness, echoed in his mind like a bell that awakens the dead. For the first time in his adult life, he felt he needed to do something that had nothing to do with profit, power, or success. He needed to cross the street and meet the child who had just turned his world upside down with a single phrase loaded with truth. The elevator had never seemed so slow. Each floor that passed increased the anxiety in the millionaire's chest, a completely foreign sensation for someone who had spent decades controlling every emotion, every reaction, every human impulse that could interfere with his business. When the doors finally opened on the ground floor, he practically ran through the marble lobby, ignoring the respectful greetings of the security guards and employees. His rational mind screamed alarms. What was he doing? Why had a street child managed to affect someone like him so much? On the sidewalk, the sunlight hit him like a slap, forcing him to blink several times before he could focus on the crowd of pedestrians. He desperately searched for the small figure of the girl, fearing that she had already disappeared among the people. He found her a few yards ahead, walking slowly with her teddy bear hugged against her chest. Her small and careful steps revealed the pain of her bare feet on the hot asphalt, but she kept her head held high with a dignity that contrasted with her fragile appearance. He began to cross the street, ignoring the honking of cars and the shouts of protest from drivers. His $3,000 suit seemed ridiculously inappropriate for the situation, but none of that mattered. There was something about that child that pulled him like an irresistible magnet. "Wait!" he shouted, his voice lost in the noise of the traffic. The girl stopped and turned around, her big eyes widening as she saw an elegant man running towards her. Instinctively, she took a few steps back, hugging her teddy bear tighter. Experience had taught her that when adults ran after her, it was rarely for good reasons. When he finally reached her, both stood still, looking at each other in a silence laden with conflicting emotions. The millionaire, who always knew exactly what to say in any business situation, found himself completely speechless before that child. Are you all right?" he managed to ask finally, his voice coming out more hoarse than he intended. The girl studied him with eyes that seemed much older than her 5 years of age. There was in them a sad wisdom, an early understanding of the cruelty of the world that made the man's heart clench in a painful way. "I'm always all right," she replied simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You don't need to worry about me." Those simple words hit the millionaire like a punch to the stomach. Here was a child who had just been assaulted for asking for food, comforting an adult who had everything in life. The role reversal was so absurd that he almost laughed if it weren't so tragic. "I saw what happened," he said, kneeling down to be at her eye level. "That woman had no right." "People are afraid of those who have nothing," the girl interrupted with a disturbing nonchalance. "They think that the lack of things is contagious, that if they're nice to me, they'll become poor too." The millionaire felt something stir in his chest, something he had long buried beneath layers of ambition and pragmatism. It was as if that child was unearthing parts of himself that he didn't even know still existed. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to keep his voice controlled. "I don't have a real name," she replied, gently rocking the teddy bear in her arms. "People call me that one, or the dirty one, or sometimes they don't call me anything at all." The answer was like a stab. The millionaire had spent his entire life being called by name, being respected, being feared. Titles, honors, positions, all of it seemed ridiculously insignificant in the face of a child who didn't even have the most basic right to have a name. "Everyone has a name," he insisted, feeling an urgent need to give her at least that basic dignity. "I used to have one before," she said, looking at the teddy bear, "but it's been so long since anyone said it that I've kind of forgotten what it sounded like." At that moment, something inside the millionaire broke completely. All his certainties about the world, about what mattered in life, about what made a person valuable, crumbled like a house of cards. He pulled a silk handkerchief from his pocket, an accessory that cost more than many people earn in a week, and gently wiped the blood that still trickled from the corner of her mouth. The girl flinched initially, but then allowed the care, as if she weren't used to gestures of tenderness. "Are you hungry?" he asked, although the answer was obvious from her skinny frame. "Always," she replied with brutal honesty. "But it's not just for food. Sometimes we're hungry for other things too." "What other things?" "For someone to say your name, for someone to worry if you're cold, to have a place that's really yours." She paused, looking directly into his eyes. "For someone to look at you like you're important." Those words echoed in the millionaire's mind all the way back to the office. He had bought the girl a snack at a nearby deli, watching fascinated as she ate slowly, savoring every crumb as if it were a banquet. But now, alone in his 47th floor office, he couldn't concentrate on anything. The financial reports seemed like unimportant paper. The future meetings seemed like exercises in futility. For the first time in decades, he questioned everything. What was he doing with his life? What was all that money for if there were children like that on the street without even a name to call their own? He tried to convince himself that it was just a moment of weakness, that he would soon return to normal. After all, he couldn't save all the children in the world. He wasn't responsible for the misery of others. But the girl's words kept echoing. "Sometimes we're hungry for someone to look at you like you're important." And he realized, with a shock that left him breathless, that despite all his wealth and power, it had been a long time since anyone had looked at him that way. It had been a long time since he himself had felt truly important to someone. 3 days had passed since the encounter on the sidewalk, and the millionaire found that he couldn't get the girl out of his head. During important meetings, his mind wandered to those large, sad eyes. While signing multi-million-dollar contracts, he heard echoes of that small voice saying that she was hungry for someone to worry about her. He had tried to convince himself that it was just a phase, a moment of sentimentality that would soon pass. But the more he tried to forget, the more present she became in his thoughts. It was as if that child had planted a seed in his soul that was now growing uncontrollably. On Wednesday morning, he made a decision that surprised him. He cancelled all the meetings of the day and instructed the driver to take him to the area where he had found the girl. He didn't have a specific plan, just an urgent need to see her again, to make sure she was okay. The search lasted for hours. He walked the streets near the restaurant, questioned shopkeepers, observed every corner where a small child could hide. Some street vendors recognized his description, the girl with the teddy bear, as they called her, but no one knew exactly where she was at that moment. When he finally found her, it was in a place that shocked him deeply. She was sleeping in the doorway of a closed pharmacy, curled up like an abandoned kitten, her teddy bear serving as a makeshift pillow. The scene was both touching and devastating. The millionaire stood for several minutes, just watching. Even sleeping, The girl's face carried an expression of alertness, as if she were always ready to run or defend herself. Her clothes were even dirtier than the last time, and he could see small scratches on her arms and legs. When she woke up and saw him, she didn't seem surprised. It was as if somehow she knew he would return. "You came back," she said simply, sitting up and hugging the teddy bear. "I came back," he confirmed, feeling strangely vulnerable in the face of that obvious realization. I brought some things for you." From the bag he was carrying, he took out a sandwich, a juice box, and some clothes he had bought at a children's store. He wasn't sure of the sizes, but he had asked the saleswoman to choose clothes suitable for a 5-year-old girl. Her eyes lit up, but not because of the food or the clothes. What really made her smile was the fact that he had thought of her, that he had bothered to come back. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, while eating the sandwich slowly, savoring each bite. It was a simple question, but it left him speechless. Why was he doing that? It wasn't charity. He had never been interested in charitable work. It wasn't guilt. He wasn't responsible for her situation. So what was it? "I don't know," he admitted finally, and that honesty surprised him. "You said something that I can't get out of my head." "What?" "About being hungry for someone to worry about you, about someone looking at you like you're important." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I think I'm hungry for that too." The girl stopped eating and looked at him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. It was as if she could see through all his masks, all the personas he had built over the years. "You have everything," she observed. "How can you be hungry?" "Having things isn't the same as having what matters," he replied, surprised by his own sincerity. She nodded as if she understood perfectly, and perhaps she did. Children in vulnerable situations develop an early understanding of human nature that often escapes protected adults. "What's your real name?" the millionaire asked. "I told you I don't remember," she said, but this time with less conviction. "Try to remember. For me." She closed her eyes, concentrating intensely, her face contorted in effort, as if she were trying to reach a memory buried very deep. "Maria," she whispered finally, opening her eyes. "I think it was Maria. Someone used to call me Maria." "Maria," he repeated, testing the name on his tongue. "It's a beautiful name." "Is it?" she asked, and there was a hope so pure in her voice that his heart clenched. "Very beautiful." "Can I call you Maria?" She nodded vigorously, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw a genuine smile light up her face. It was as if, in recovering her name, she had recovered a piece of her lost identity. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking. The millionaire discovered that she was more intelligent than many of the people he did business with. Her observations about human nature were insightful and profound, tempered by a wisdom that only suffering can teach. When it was time to leave, he found himself reluctant to leave her. The idea of returning to his luxurious apartment while she slept on the street bothered him in a way he had never experienced. "Maria," he said, kneeling down again to be at her eye level, "can I come back tomorrow?" "You can," she replied, hugging the teddy bear, "but you don't need to bring things. You just need to bring you." Those words stayed with him all night. While dining alone in his penthouse apartment, looking out at the city through windows that cost more than many houses, he thought about a 5-year-old girl who valued his presence more than his gifts. For the first time in years, he questioned what wealth really meant, and he began to suspect that perhaps it was he, not she, who was truly impoverished. The visits became a routine. Every day, after work, the millionaire instructed his driver to take him to the area where Maria used to stay. Sometimes he found her in the same place. Other times he needed to look for her in the nearby streets, but he always found her. As the days passed, he began to understand her life better. Maria had developed a complex system of urban survival that was impressive in its sophistication. She knew where to get clean water. She knew the schedules of the restaurants that sometimes donated leftovers. She identified the safest places to sleep. "You can't stay on the street forever," he said on a rainy Thursday, while they shared a snack under the awning of a closed store. "And where else am I going to stay?" she asked pragmatically. It was a simple question, but it opened a universe of complications. The millionaire had begun to research shelters and orphanages, but what he discovered left him deeply disturbed. Most institutions were overcrowded, underfunded, and many children ended up running away because the conditions were worse than life on the streets. "There are places," he began, but the words died in his throat when he saw the expression on her face. "I've been to places," Maria said with a frightening maturity. "Places where people say they want to help you, but they really just want you to stop bothering them on the street." The millionaire felt a wave of anger against a system that failed so completely with its most vulnerable children. But he also felt something more disturbing, a growing need to protect that specific girl, to get her out of that situation. What if you stayed with me?" he asked impulsively. The words came out before he could think them through completely, but once said, he realized that he desired them intensely. The idea of taking Maria home, of giving her security and comfort, had become a silent obsession. But Maria shook her head. "You don't even really know me, and I don't know if I can trust adults." "You trust me," he pointed out. "A little," she admitted. "But trusting a little is different from going to live in someone's house." It was a wise distinction, which showed how that child had learned to protect herself in a world that had repeatedly disappointed her. The millionaire felt both proud of her intelligence and sad for the need for that protection. Meanwhile, in the corporate world, his change in behavior began to be noticed. Employees commented that he seemed more distracted, less focused on the numbers. In an important meeting, he had advocated for a social responsibility program that included helping homeless children, a proposal that his colleagues received with surprise. "Since when do you care about social causes?" asked his oldest partner after the meeting. "Since I realized that there are more important things than profit," he replied, surprised by his own honesty. The answer generated worried glances among the board members. For them, the man who had always been the personification of corporate coldness was showing signs of sentimental weakness that could compromise the interests of the corporation. But the millionaire didn't care about those concerns. For the first time in decades, he had found something that he considered more valuable than market expansion and profit margins. He had found purpose. Maria, in turn, was also changing. The constant presence of someone who cared about her was awakening aspects of her personality that had been buried by the need for survival. She began to talk more about dreams and hopes, not just about where to get the next meal. "If I could have anything in the world," she said one afternoon while watching the clouds from a park bench where they had met, "I would want a real family." "What would that family be like?" he asked, genuinely curious. "It would be someone who was happy when I came home. Someone who knew how I like my milk, not too hot, not too cold. Someone who remembered my birthday." She paused, hugging the teddy bear. "Someone who missed me when I wasn't around." Ironically, it was he who lived the life that Maria described as ideal, but without any of the emotional elements she valued. "And you?" she asked, turning to look at him. "What would you want if you could have anything?" The question caught him off guard. No one had asked him about his desires in years. People assumed that because he had money, he automatically had everything he wanted. "I would want," he began, then stopped, surprised at what he was about to say. "I wouldn't want to feel so alone." "But you have a lot of people working with you," Maria observed. "Working with someone isn't the same as having someone who cares about you," he explained, echoing her own words from days earlier. Maria nodded in understanding. "It's like when there are a lot of people on the street, but you still feel invisible." Exactly. That was exactly it. The millionaire realized that he and that 5-year-old girl shared the same kind of loneliness, just packaged in different ways. As the weeks passed, the bond between them strengthened. Maria began to trust him more, sharing fragments of memories about her previous life, vague recollections of a woman who sang her to sleep, of a man who made her laugh, of a house that smelled like cookies. The millionaire, in turn, began to share aspects of his own life that he had never revealed to anyone. He spoke about the constant pressure to maintain his financial empire, about the loneliness of decisions that affected thousands of people, about how he had become a money-making machine at the expense of his humanity. "Don't you like being rich?" Maria asked one afternoon, after he had described the pressure of his business responsibilities. "It's not that I don't like it," he explained carefully. "It's that imagine you have a lot of food, but you have to eat alone every day. The food is still good, but it doesn't satisfy in the same way." "Oh," she said, understanding immediately. "It's like when I find good food in the dumpster, but I wish I had someone to share it with." The simple and profound analogy left him speechless. A 5-year-old child had perfectly summed up the existential void he had felt for years. It was at that moment that he realized something that frightened him. He was falling in love, not romantically, obviously, but in a deep, paternal way that he had never experienced. Maria was becoming the daughter he never knew he wanted to have. And with that realization came a terrible fear. What would happen if something bad happened to her? What would happen if someone found out about their daily meetings and questioned his intentions? What would happen if she decided she didn't want to see him anymore? These fears kept him awake at night, looking out the window of his apartment towards the area of the city where she slept, desperately wishing he could protect her from all the dangers she faced on the streets. But Maria was strong and independent in a way that he had never been. She had survived situations that would completely break him, and she continued to maintain a sweetness and a hope that inspired him daily. "You teach me things," he said on a Friday, as they walked down a less crowded street. "Me? But I don't even know how to read properly," she replied, surprised. "You teach me about courage, about finding happiness in the small things, about what really matters in life." Maria was silent for a moment, processing those words. Then, completely unexpectedly, she stopped walking and extended her small hand to him. "Do you want to be my real friend?" she asked with a touching seriousness. "More than anything in the world," he replied, gently squeezing that small, trusting hand. At that moment, walking hand in hand down an ordinary street in an ordinary city, the millionaire felt a wealth that all his money had never been able to buy. But he didn't know that forces beyond his control were already in motion, forces that would soon test this nascent bond in ways that neither of them was prepared to face. It was on a grey Monday that their world both crumbled and rebuilt itself simultaneously. The millionaire had arrived earlier than usual at their meeting place, carrying a special gift for Maria. A children's book with colorful pictures that he thought she would like, even though she was still learning to read. But when he found her, he immediately realized that something was different. Maria was quieter than usual, hugging the teddy bear with an intensity that suggested deep anxiety. Her clothes, the same ones he had bought weeks ago, were dirtier, and there were new scratches on her arms. "What happened?" he asked, kneeling in front of her with genuine concern. "I had nightmares," she murmured, avoiding his gaze. "Nightmares about before." "Before what?" "Before I was alone. I dreamed about her again." "About who?" "About my mom." Maria's voice came out as a whisper laden with pain. "She was singing that song that I kind of remember, you know. And there was a man with her, a man who looked—" She stopped speaking abruptly, looking at him with a strange expression that he couldn't interpret. "Looked like who?" he insisted gently. "Like you," she said finally. "The man in my dream looked like you." The millionaire's heart stopped for a moment. An icy feeling ran down his spine, mixed with something he didn't dare name. Coincidences existed, of course, But there was something in the way she said it, something in the expression in her eyes that awakened memories he had long buried. "Maria," he said, trying to keep his voice calm, "do you remember anything else about your parents? Anything at all?" She closed her eyes, concentrating intensely as she always did when trying to access fragmented memories. "My mom had long, dark hair. She smelled like flowers. And the man had a mark on his hand, right here," she said, touching the back of her own left hand. The world stopped. The millionaire automatically looked at his own left hand, where a small but distinctive scar marked the spot where he had cut himself in a childhood accident. A scar that few people knew about, a mark he considered insignificant. What did that mark look like?" he asked in a hoarse voice. "It was like this," Maria said, drawing in the air the exact shape of his scar. The millionaire's legs buckled. He sat heavily on the sidewalk, his mind racing through memories he had tried to forget for years. Anna, his wife Anna, who had died when their daughter was only a year old. The daughter he had... No, he whispered to himself, it can't be. But the pieces began to fall into place with a terrifying clarity. Maria's age matched. Her physical characteristics, the large dark eyes, the shape of her face, even the way she furrowed her brow when she thought, were strikingly similar to Anna's. "Maria," he said, trying to control the tremor in his voice. "What's your last name? Do you remember your full name?" "Silva," she replied automatically. "Maria Silva." Silva. Anna's maiden name, which she had kept even after the marriage. The last name that his daughter would carry if he hadn't. The memories he had suppressed for 5 years exploded in his mind like a breached dam. Wunner dying in the hospital, him completely lost and desperate, the baby crying constantly, him not knowing how to care for her alone, the pressure of business, the urgent decisions that needed to be made, Anna's family offering help, saying they would take care of the child temporarily until he got himself organized. He had agreed, entrusting his daughter to the care of Anna's sister, promising himself that it would only be for a few weeks. But the weeks became months, and the months became years. There was always an excuse, an urgent deal, an important trip, a crisis that needed his immediate attention. And then, when he finally decided to get his daughter back, he discovered that Anna's sister had moved without leaving an address. His attempts to find them were thwarted by lawyers who said that the family considered that he had abandoned the child, that it would be better for everyone if he simply moved on with his life. Instead of fighting, he had accepted it. He had convinced himself that his daughter would be better off without him, that a child deserved more than a father who prioritized business over family. He had buried the pain under obsessive work and financial success, building an empire on the ashes of his abandoned fatherhood. "Sir?" Maria's small voice brought him back to the present. "You're crying." He hadn't even realized that tears were streaming down his face. He looked at the girl, his daughter, his own daughter, and felt as if the whole world had shifted. "Maria," he said with a choked voice, "I need to tell you something very important." During the next hour, with carefully chosen words appropriate for a 5-year-old child, he told her about Anna, about how he had been weak and cowardly, about how he had made the worst decision of his life by letting her go. Maria listened to him in silence, her large eyes processing information that was both shocking and, strangely, comforting. Finally, the pieces of her own story made sense. "So you're my dad?" she asked when he finished. "Yes," he whispered, "I'm your dad. And I'm sorry, Maria. I'm so sorry it took me so long to find you. I'm so sorry for everything you went through alone." She was silent for a long moment, hugging the teddy bear and looking at him with an expression that mixed confusion, hurt, and something that could be hope. "Why did you let me go?" she asked finally. And the simple question carried years of abandonment and loneliness. "Because I was a coward," he replied with brutal honesty, because I was afraid that I wouldn't know how to be a good father to you, because I thought it would be easier to pretend that you didn't exist than to admit that I didn't know how to love you right. And now I know that I've spent the last 5 years living half a life. Now I know that you're the most important thing that has ever happened to me. Now I know that I want to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for all the time we've lost." Maria looked at him for a long moment, her small eyes assessing the sincerity in his words. Then slowly she extended her small hand and touched the tears on his face. "Don't cry, Dad," she said simply. "We found each other now." And with those simple words, 5 years of guilt, remorse, and self-hatred began to dissolve. They didn't disappear completely, they never would, but they transformed into something new, determination to do better, to be better, to give his daughter all the love she had missed. They sat on the sidewalk for hours, father and daughter reunited by the most improbable circumstances, beginning the long process of getting to know each other again. And for the first time in 5 years, both felt that they had finally come home. The happiness of the reunion lasted exactly 3 days. 3 days during which the millionaire father took Maria to see his apartment, bought her appropriate clothes, enrolled her in a private school, and began to imagine what their new life would be like as a single father of a 5-year-old girl. Maria was adapting better than he had dared to hope. The transition from the street to luxury could have been traumatic, but she showed an adaptability that impressed him. More importantly, she was starting to smile more, to play, to act like a normal child should act. But on Thursday morning, everything fell apart. The millionaire was in a meeting when his secretary came into the office with a look of panic on her face. "Sir," she said in a low voice, "there's a social worker downstairs. She says she needs to speak with you urgently about a little girl." His blood ran cold. He went immediately to the ground floor, where he found a stern, middle-aged woman, carrying a folder full of documents and an expression that promised nothing good. "Sir," she said without preamble, "my name is Dr. Santos, from Child Protective Services. We have been informed that you are keeping a minor in your residence without the proper legal documentation." "She's my daughter," he said, trying to keep calm. "According to our records, Maria Silva was officially declared abandoned 4 years ago. She is considered a child at risk and needs to be immediately placed in an appropriate institution." "But I'm her father. I can prove." "You can try to prove it," the social worker interrupted, "but that will be a long and complicated process. In the meantime, by law, the child must remain in state custody." The millionaire's world crumbled once again. All his wealth, all his power, all his connections were useless in the face of the inflexible bureaucracy of the child protection system. "Where is the girl now?" Dr. Santos asked. "At school," he replied automatically, then regretted giving the information. "We'll pick her up there. You can come along if you wish, but the child will be coming with us today." The next 2 hours were the most desperate of the millionaire's life. He called his best lawyers, mobilized every contact he had in the government, offered bribes that were politely refused. Nothing worked. The system had its rules, and those rules said that Maria needed to be removed from his custody immediately. When they arrived at the school, Maria was in the playground playing with other children. For the first time in years, she looked like a normal child, laughing, running, without the worried expression she constantly carried when living on the streets. Seeing the happiness on her face made what was about to happen even more painful. "Maria," he called, approaching slowly. She ran towards him with a radiant smile, but the smile disappeared when she saw the serious woman beside him. "Who's she?" she asked, instinctively hiding behind her dad's legs. "Maria, Doctor," Santos said in a professional but not unkind voice. "My name is Dr. Santos. I've come to take you to a safe place where you can stay while your dad works out some important things." "I don't want to go," Maria said immediately, grabbing her dad's hand tightly. "I want to stay with him." I know, honey, but sometimes we need to do things we don't want to, so everything turns out right in the end. The millionaire knelt beside Maria, feeling as if his heart was being ripped from his chest. "Maria," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady, "I need to take care of some important paperwork. It'll take a little while, but I promise I'll come get you." "You promised before and you left me," she said, and the words were like a knife. "This time is different. This time I know who you are. This time I know how important you are to me." He held her small face between his hands. "Do you trust me?" Maria looked at him for a long moment, her large eyes shining with unshed tears. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Then let me fix this the right way. Let me fight for you the right way." The farewell was devastating. Maria didn't cry. She rarely cried. But the way she clung to her teddy bear and looked back as she was led away almost destroyed the millionaire. That night, alone in his apartment that still smelled of Maria's baby shampoo, he did something he hadn't done in decades. He cried until he had no tears left, but when dawn broke, the tears had turned into steely determination. He mobilized the best law firm in the country, specializing in family law. He hired private investigators to gather all possible evidence of his paternity. He began the process to legally establish his rights as a father. The process would be long, expensive, and emotionally devastating. But for the first time in his life, he was fighting for something that truly mattered. Maria, meanwhile, was placed in a foster home on the outskirts of the city. It was a well-intentioned but overburdened institution, where 20 children shared rooms designed for 10, where the staff did the best they could with limited resources. For a child who had just experienced what it was like to have a real home, a father who cared, individual attention and unconditional love, the return to institutional life was brutal. But Maria was strong. She had survived the streets, and she would survive this too. Every night, before going to sleep, she hugged her teddy bear and whispered the same promise. "He'll be back. This time, he'll be back." And across town in his empty apartment, the millionaire looked in the direction of the foster home and made the same promise. "I'm going to get her, no matter how long it takes, no matter how much it costs. I'm going to bring her home." The fight had only just begun, but both were determined to win. Because now they knew what it meant to be a family, and they weren't going to give it up without a fight. 6 months passed. 6 months of endless legal battles, of bureaucratic hearings, of sleepless nights studying family law that he never imagined he would need to know. The millionaire had discovered that all his money and influence meant very little when facing a system designed to protect children from potentially dangerous adults. He had sold 2 companies to pay the legal fees. He had submitted to humiliating psychological evaluations. He had opened every aspect of his private life to public scrutiny. All of this with no guarantee of success. But he had also changed in ways that even he didn't fully recognize. The man who once cut budgets without flinching now funded assistance programs for street children. The executive who had never given a thought to social issues now met regularly with social workers, educators, and child psychologists. "You're fighting not just for your daughter," observed his new lawyer, Dr. Ferreira, during one of their weekly meetings. "You're fighting for all the children like her." It was true, although he hadn't consciously realized it. Every injustice he discovered in the system, every flaw he identified in the care of vulnerable children, motivated him to do something about it. He had created a foundation, established partnerships with non-profits, and initiated programs that he hoped would prevent other children from going through what Maria had gone through. "Maybe," Dr. Ferreira said carefully, "that's exactly what the judges need to see. That you're not just a rich man trying to buy back a clear conscience, but someone genuinely committed to the well-being of children." Meanwhile, at the foster home, Maria was also changing. At first, she had isolated herself, refusing to make friends or become attached to any adult. She had learned painfully that getting too attached only caused pain when people inevitably left. But gradually, her naturally caring nature began to emerge. She became the unofficial older sister of the younger children, the one who comforted the frightened newcomers, who shared her food when someone was still hungry, who told bedtime stories to soothe the nightmares of others. "She's special," commented Sophia, one of the most experienced caregivers with the director of the foster home. "I've never seen a child so young with so much compassion for others. Children who have suffered a lot sometimes develop an extraordinary empathy," the director replied. "They know what it's like to feel pain, so they do everything they can to protect others from the same pain." The artificiality of the situation was painful for both, but seeing Maria again, even under those circumstances, gave the millionaire renewed strength to continue fighting. "You're different," Maria observed during that first hour-long visit. "Different how?" "Sadder, but also more real." The observation of a 5-year-old child hit him like a lightning bolt. She was right. He was sadder. Her separation had opened a wound in his soul that bled constantly. But he was also more real. He had stopped pretending that money and business success were all that mattered. He had stopped hiding behind corporate masks. "I miss you every day," he said simply. "I miss you too," she replied. "But I know you're fighting for me. The other kids told me you're helping a lot of people." She knew. Even at the foster home, news of his transformation had reached her. The programs he had created, the donations he had made, the changes he was trying to implement in the child protection system. "I want you to be proud of me," he said. "I already am," she replied with the devastating simplicity that always characterized her deepest words. The visits became weekly, then bi-weekly, then finally unsupervised visits were allowed. Each small legal victory was celebrated as a battle won in a larger war. The defining moment came when Dr. Ferreira entered his office with a smile he hadn't seen in months. "We have a date," she announced. "The final hearing has been scheduled. In 2 weeks, a judge will definitively decide on Maria's custody." "And our chances?" "Good, very good. You have demonstrated genuine change, real commitment, and most importantly, the system itself recognizes that Maria is better off with you than in the institution." 2 weeks, 14 days that would determine the rest of their lives. That night, for the first time in months, the millionaire slept deeply. He dreamed of Maria running through the halls of his apartment, filling the empty spaces with laughter and life. He dreamed of breakfasts together, of bedtime stories, of all the everyday moments of fatherhood that he had missed and desperately wanted to recover. At the foster home, Maria also dreamed. She dreamed of a house that smelled like flowers, like her mom, but that had the security and love that only her dad could offer. They were only 2 weeks away from finding out if their dreams would become reality. The day of the final hearing dawned grey and rainy, as if the sky itself reflected the tension hanging over the decision that would forever change 2 lives. The millionaire had woken up before the alarm after a restless night filled with possible scenarios, some hopeful, others devastating. He dressed with special care that morning. Not the intimidating business attire he used to impress opponents in business, but something simpler, more human. He wanted the judge to see in him not the cold and calculating magnate he had been, but the transformed father he had become. At the foster home, Maria was also being prepared for the big day. Sophia, the caregiver who had become especially close to her during those months, helped her to put on the light blue dress that her dad had sent, especially for the occasion. "Are you nervous, honey?" Sophia asked, noticing how Maria's small hands were trembling slightly as she hugged the teddy bear. "A little," Maria admitted. "What if they decide I can't stay with my dad? Then you'll continue to be the brave and special girl you've always been," Sophia replied, kissing the top of her head. "But I have a very good feeling about today." The courtroom was packed in a way that surprised everyone. In the previous months, the story of the millionaire who had reunited with his daughter on the streets had become public knowledge. Reporters, child rights activists, and ordinary people who had been moved by the narrative were present to witness the outcome. When Maria entered the courtroom, small and dignified in her blue dress, a respectful silence filled the room. She searched with her eyes until she found her dad, and when their eyes met, both smiled. Nervous smiles, hopeful smiles, full of love. The judge, Dr. Mendez, was a man in his 60s, known for his seriousness and impartiality. He had carefully reviewed all the documents in the case, all the psychological evaluations, all the reports on the millionaire's transformation in recent months. "This is an extraordinary case," he began, his voice echoing through the silent room. "We rarely see a situation where so many complex factors intertwine: parental abandonment, survival on the streets, family reunification, and profound personal transformation." The millionaire felt his heart race. The judge's words did not reveal his intentions, and the uncertainty was almost unbearable. "During the past 6 months," Dr. Mendez continued, "this court has observed remarkable changes in the petitioner, changes that go far beyond simple attempts to impress the legal system." The judge turned to look directly at the millionaire. "Sir, what motivated you to seek your daughter again after 5 years of absence?" "She found me first, Your Honor," he replied, his voice steady but laden with emotion. "She showed me what I had lost, not just her presence, but my own humanity. She taught me that success without love is just a sophisticated form of failure." "And what do you have to say about the 5 years you didn't look for her?" The question he had feared, but for which he was prepared. "I have no excuses, Your Honor. I was a coward. I placed fear and convenience above love and responsibility. But I have learned that admitting mistakes is the first step to correcting them. These last months have not only been about trying to get my daughter back, they have been about becoming the man, the father that she deserves." Dr. Mendez nodded and turned to Maria. "And you, young lady, how do you feel about living with your father?" Maria stood up, holding the teddy bear tightly. Her small but clear voice filled the silence of the room. "I spent a lot of time angry at him for leaving," she said with an honesty that impressed everyone present. "But I've learned that sometimes people do the wrong things because they're scared, not because they're bad." She looked directly at her father. "My dad was scared. He didn't know how to take care of me. But now he's learned. And I've also learned that forgiving someone doesn't mean what they did was right. It means you don't want to carry the anger forever." A murmur of admiration swept through the room. The wisdom of that 5-year-old child had touched everyone present. "Besides," Maria continued, "he's not just taking care of me now. He's taking care of a lot of kids who need help. That makes me proud of him." The judge was silent for a long moment, clearly impressed. Then he addressed the social worker. "Dr. Santos, what is the official recommendation of Child Protective Services?" "Your Honor," she replied, "after extensive evaluation, we recommend that custody be granted to the biological father, with ongoing psychological counseling for both during the transition period." "And the position of the foster home where Maria has resided?" The director of the foster home stood up. "Your Honor, although we have become very fond of Maria and she has been a positive presence in our institution, it is evident that she thrives in a family environment. We fully support the reunification." Dr. Mendez made a few notes, then removed his glasses and cleaned them carefully, a gesture that increased the tension in the room. "This case," he said finally, "represents both the failures and the possibilities for redemption of our system. Failures because it allowed a child to fall through the cracks and end up living on the streets. Possibilities because it has shown that it is never too late to do what is right." He looked directly at the millionaire. "Sir, you made a grave mistake in abandoning your daughter, but in recent months you have demonstrated genuine remorse and real change. More importantly, you have demonstrated that you have learned that being a father is not about being perfect. It's about being present, persisting, and putting the child's needs above your own. The millionaire's heart was beating so hard that he was sure everyone could hear it. Therefore, the judge continued, this court grants full custody of Maria Silva to her biological father with the following conditions: family psychological counseling for 6 months, monthly reports to Child Protective Services for 1 year, and continued commitment to the social assistance programs that the petitioner has established. The room exploded in applause. Tears streamed down the millionaire's face as Maria ran towards him, finally free to hug him without supervision, without time limitations, without fear of separation. "We did it, Dad," she whispered against his shoulder, using that precious word in public for the first time. "We did it, my daughter," he replied, his voice choked with emotion. "And this time, it's forever." When they left the courtroom, they were greeted by a crowd of supporters, journalists, and other families who had been inspired by their story. But all that mattered to both of them was being together. That night, home at last, the millionaire tucked Maria into bed in her own room, a room that had been carefully decorated with everything a 5-year-old girl could desire. "Dad?" she said sleepily, hugging the teddy bear that now had the company of several other new toys. "Yes, honey? Do you think Mom is happy that we found each other?" The millionaire felt tears sting his eyes. "I'm absolutely sure she is, Maria. I'm sure she knew that, even if it took a while, one day we would find our way back to each other." "I think so too," she murmured, already almost asleep. "Good night, Dad. Good night, my daughter. I love you. I love you too." As he watched Maria fall asleep in safety, the millionaire reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them there. From a chance encounter on the street to a legal reunification, they had navigated through every possible challenge and emerged stronger. But more importantly, they had both learned that true love is not about never making mistakes. It's about having the courage to admit when you are wrong and doing everything necessary to correct those mistakes. From now on, each day would be an opportunity to build happy memories that compensated for lost years, and both were ready to seize every moment of that second chance that life had given them. A year had passed since the court decision, and life had transformed in ways that neither the millionaire nor Maria could have imagined. The house that once echoed with loneliness now vibrated with the sound of children's laughter, small footsteps running through the halls, and animated conversations during meals. Maria had blossomed like a flower that had finally found fertile soil and adequate sunlight. At school, she excelled not only academically, but as a natural leader who protected smaller children and included those who felt excluded. Her teachers commented regularly on her exceptional emotional maturity and her capacity for empathy that went beyond her age. "She has an old soul," observed her teacher during a meeting with her father. "It's as if she has lived experiences that have taught her about human nature in a way that few children understand." The millionaire knew exactly where that wisdom came from. Maria had learned about resilience, compassion, and forgiveness the hard way. Now, safe and loved, she used those lessons to help others. During Saturday mornings, which had become a sacred tradition between father and daughter, they visited the foster home where Maria had stayed. She insisted on keeping in touch with the children she had left behind, bringing toys, books, and more importantly, hoped that they too could find loving families. "Why do you make a point of coming back here?" her father asked during one of those visits, watching as Maria comforted a new girl who was crying because she missed her home. "Because when you're in the dark, sometimes the only thing that keeps you alive is knowing that someone who's been through it managed to get out," she replied simply. "I want to be proof that good things can happen." The millionaire had undergone his own radical transformation. The company that was once his sole passion now served a greater purpose. He had completely restructured his corporate priorities, implementing social responsibility programs that became a model for other companies. The Maria Foundation, named in honor of his daughter, had become one of the most respected organizations serving vulnerable children. It not only provided shelter and food, but focused on family reunification, education, and psychological support. "You changed the whole game," commented Dr. Santos, the same social worker who had once taken Maria from his custody during a meeting about expanding the Foundation's programs. "Before, we had institutions that kept children safe. Now we have a system that actively works to give them real families." But the most profound changes were visible at home, in the small and everyday moments that form the fabric of a family. Like Maria insisting on helping to prepare breakfast every Sunday, even if it meant a messier kitchen. Like her running to hug him when he came home from work, always eager to tell him about her day. "Dad," she said one night, as they did homework together at the kitchen table, "do you remember when you told me you were hungry for someone to care about you?" "I remember," he replied, curious about where the conversation was leading. "Are you still hungry for that?" The millionaire stopped reviewing her math problems and really considered the question. When was the last time he had felt truly alone? When was the last time he had questioned whether his life had meaning? "No," he said finally. "That hunger has completely disappeared. What about yours?" "Gone too," Maria replied with a smile. "I think we fed each other." It was an observation too profound for a 6-year-old, but perfectly appropriate for Maria, who had always seen truths that others missed. On Thursday nights, they had established a special ritual. After dinner, they sat on the balcony of the apartment, and Maria told stories about her adventures on the streets, but now transformed into tales of courage and hope, not of trauma and survival. "Once upon a time, there was a very small girl who lived in a very big city," she always began in the same way. "She didn't have a home, but she had a huge heart. And one day, that huge heart caught the attention of a man who had forgotten how to use his own heart." The millionaire listened to these stories with fascination, seeing their shared journey through his daughter's eyes. In Maria's version, he wasn't a cold businessman who had abandoned responsibility. He was an enchanted prince who had forgotten how to love and who needed a little fairy to break the spell. "And did they live happily ever after?" he always asked at the end, even knowing the answer. "They lived with purpose ever after," Maria always corrected. "Happiness comes and goes, but purpose stays. And their purpose was to take care of each other and to help other children find their families too." During one of those nights, as they watched the city lights twinkle like earthly stars, Maria asked a question that caught him off guard. "Dad, do you think if you hadn't given me away when I was a baby, I would be the same person I am today?" It was a complex question, laden with philosophical implications that could torment both father and daughter. But Maria asked it with genuine curiosity, without rancor. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "Maybe you would be more innocent, more protected. Maybe you wouldn't have developed all this compassion and wisdom." "I think so too," she agreed. "Sometimes bad things happen so that very good things can happen later, like life needed to teach us some lessons before giving us the presents." "Do you consider our family a present?" "The best present," she replied without hesitation, "because we had to fight for it. Things you fight for are always more precious." As Maria grew and developed, the millionaire often found himself learning more from her than teaching. She had retained all the wisdom acquired during her difficult years, but could now apply it from a position of safety and love. At school, she became the natural advocate for children who were shy or different. At home, she was the one who often comforted her father when he had difficult days at work. At the foundation, her presence inspired both employees and the children served. "She's our most effective ambassador," joked one of the foundation's employees. "People look at her and see living proof that our work works." But to the millionaire, Maria was much more than an ambassador or a symbol. She was the daughter he had lost and found, the teacher who had appeared when he most needed to learn, the light that had illuminated dark corners of his soul that he didn't even know existed. On a Sunday afternoon, while visiting the cemetery where Anna was buried, a monthly tradition they had established, Maria placed fresh flowers on the grave and whispered a silent prayer. "What did you say to her?" her father asked. "I thanked her for giving me life and for choosing you to be my dad, even when you were confused about how to do it right." The millionaire felt tears sting his eyes. "Do you think she has forgiven us for all the lost time?" "I think she always knew that one day we would find each other," Maria replied confidently. "Mums know those things. She knew that you needed to learn some lessons first, and that I needed to get strong enough to teach you." Walking back to the car, hand in hand under the golden afternoon sun, both reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them there. From a chance encounter on a busy sidewalk to a real family, forged in pain but tempered in love. "Dad," Maria said when they got home, "do you regret anything?" "I regret taking so long to find you," he replied immediately. "But I don't regret the journey that brought us here, because it made us who we are today." "I don't regret it either," she agreed. "Not even the hard days on the street, because they taught me to value what I have now." That night, after Maria was asleep, the millionaire stood in her bedroom doorway, watching her sleep peacefully, the teddy bear still faithfully in her arms. In a few short years, she had transformed not only his life, but his understanding of what really mattered in the world. He thought about the man he had been, focused exclusively on profits, disconnected from any greater purpose, living a life that was materially rich but spiritually empty. That man seemed like a stranger now, someone from a distant past that he could barely recognize. The child sleeping in the bed had been his salvation in ways she probably would never fully understand. She had shown him that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in meaningful relationships. That real success isn't about what you accumulate, but about the positive impact you have on the lives of others. More importantly, Maria had taught him that it is never too late to start over, to become the person you were meant to be all along. That redemption isn't about perfection, but about choosing to do better every day. As he gently closed her bedroom door and walked towards his own room, the millionaire made a silent promise, the same promise he had made every night for a year. Tomorrow would be another day to be the father Maria deserved, another day to use his resources and influence to help other children like her, another day to prove that love, once truly found, can transform everything. And in her room, sleeping soundly with a small smile on her lips, Maria dreamed of all the adventures that were yet to come. Adventures that she would face not alone on the dangerous streets of an indifferent city, but hand in hand with the man who had learned that being a father was the most important job of his life. The girl who once didn't even have a name now had a family, a future, and a purpose. And the man who once measured his worth only in numbers now understood that some things cannot be quantified. They can only be felt, lived, and shared with those we love. They had found each other at the exact moment when they both needed it most. And together, they were building not only a family, but a legacy of love that would spread far beyond their own lives, touching countless other children who were still waiting for their own second chance to have a real family. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day. What would you do in the millionaire's place? Comment below and share this story with someone special.